So Piers Morgan attempted to debate Nick Fuentes, and it went very, very poorly for Piers. And I want to talk about it in this video. I'm not going to get into a lot of the substance of what they talked about, but just the debate style, things Piers did, and why I think it made him look really, really bad. So my thoughts on Piers super quickly are that I've never really been a fan of his. I've heard many people in the UK don't really like him. So he kind of fled to America to try to make his, shtick there. And I think people are quickly realizing that he's sort of a charlatan. He's just a fraud. He doesn't really stand for much. I've never really heard him give a substantive, idea or propose something that is actually helpful. He's typically just a critic, and he takes the popular position, right? So he's this liberal, but he is anti-woke. So he tries to appease the left, tries to appease the right, and tries to sort of fence sit. That's what I see Piers Morgan as. And so he has Nick on his show, which I've never seen before. Sorry, no offense, but I kind of knew what this was going to be. I knew that Piers was going to try and take this white knight position against Nick and try to, basically box him into these different categories and make him look bad. And I've taken debate in the past. I've been the president of a club that was debating in the past. And so I'm no expert, but I saw a lot of the tactics that Piers sort of employed. Many of them were cheap tricks that didn't work. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, really. So the first thing is that when the interview started, Piers did something that I thought was very inappropriate, very just in poor taste. And he brings up Nick Fuentes' father. And he says his full name on camera. And that does a few different things. Number one, it doxes and endangers Nick's father. I'm sure Nick tries to live as private of a life as he can, given what he does and the things that he says. And also from a debate perspective, Piers came into this saying, hey, this is one of the first things he said. He was like, hey, this is going to be a conversation, not a gotcha. I'm just getting to know you kind of thing. I want to have you clear some things up. But I want to be very clear that Piers Morgan knew what he was doing. He came into this interview to try to destroy Nick Fuentes. That was his goal. And so by bringing up his father, he employed a very cheap trick, which was to try to knock Nick out of his comfort zone. So, by saying these things, he was hoping that Nick would get rattled, he would become emotional, he would lash out, and that's when you can make someone look bad. You'd knock them off their game. And Nick just kind of smiles and says, I know what you're doing. And Piers brings up the same point over and over and over. He mentions his father, I want to say between 5 and 10 times in the beginning of this debate. And it's some kind of quote that Nick had, spoken about his father on a show, I believe. And Piers's ultimate point was, is your father a racist? That's what he asked him straight to his face. And again, none of this is in good faith. None of this is in an actual conversation. This is just all... can I prod? Can I make Nick look bad? Can I make his family look bad? There's all these tactics that go into this. And Nick sniffs it out within 2 seconds and says, I know what you're trying to do. And then he answers the question very, in a very, I think, classy manner. He's able to answer the question very well. But I think Piers was frustrated by the fact that his cheap tactic didn't work. I'm guessing this was his, this was his big move in the beginning, and when it didn't work on Nick, he kept coming back to the well and coming back to the well. And your father, and is he a racist? And you said, and so it was this whole thing. And it just looked so bad on Piers. And later on, I think Nick said that his parents have cancer, they're sick, and so you have now doxed a man who is potentially sick and potentially dying of cancer. So good one, Piers, I guess. And then the next point is that there's this conversation, and they go at it over race and over statistics because, Piers tries to, again, prod and sort of egg Nick on. And it's like, are you a racist? And are you this and that? And of course, Nick also, this entire interview is trolling Piers. I mean, this is what anyone with a brain and an understanding of what trolling is can see. Most of this interview, Nick sort of trolls Piers because I want to clear this up. Piers is bringing up ridiculous points, and he's trying to make Nick look bad. So at a certain point, I think Nick just accepts it and goes, I'm just going to troll him. So whatever nasty thing you throw at me, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, whatever. And they get into this debate over race and over Nick's thoughts about crime statistics, specifically in regard to black people. And then Piers pivots and tries to bring up, well, what percent of white people or how many school shooters are white. And basically, my opinion within this segment is that Nick brings up a really good point. He brings up proportionality and percentages, and you can sort of see Piers. I think either he touches his ear, but he alludes to the fact that he has an entire team fact-checking in his ear. And to me, this just makes you look bad as a debater, because he basically gave away the idea and the info that Nick Fuentes is sitting there in good faith. He has no team around him. He's just speaking to Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan has probably 50 people sitting in a room behind him on ChatGPT looking up everything that Nick is saying and feeding Piers information. And so he tries to correct Nick, and he's like, well, actually, I have a team in the back and blah, blah, blah. This is what the actual statistics say. But he missed the fact that Nick was talking about proportionality. So he never addressed Nick's point at all. And Nick actually did something that I thought was a brilliant debating tactic, which is he sort of caught Pierce's, hey, I'm fact checking you, and used it against him. He flipped it and said, oh, you're fact checking me. Cool. Well, then what's this? Ask your team this question. And Piers could never do it. And then they end the interview with this bizarrely weird, this is probably the clip that's going the most viral, this bizarrely, just strangely inappropriate question where Piers asks Nick about his sexual activity. And again, Nick points out easily that what Piers is doing is he's trying to make him look like an incel. You're this weird sort of basement dweller. You've never touched a woman. For that reason, you're this incel, and you're this weird, Reddit, Discord mod bro kind of guy. And Nick answers honestly. He says no. And super quick point. For some reason, everyone keeps asking Nick if he's dating or if he likes women. I have a theory that he probably has a girlfriend that he's never going to tell the public about. If I were him, that's what I would do. So I think Nick probably has a girlfriend, if I had to guess. And I think that he will never, ever admit that he even has a girlfriend, so that people aren't looking into who she is. Because once they find that out, it's doxing, it's violence, it's everything. And, so I think he's holding those cards very private. But he, answers the question very honestly, and he says, no, I'm not sexually active. And Nick is a Catholic. He's spoken about this many times. And Piers sort of mocks him for it and laughs at him for it. And he's like, oh, so you've never touched a woman. So again, you're a weirdo, you're an incel, you're a loser. And Piers Morgan himself is Catholic. In the Catholic faith, it is a big deal to remain celibate, I believe that's the correct word, before marriage. You're not having sex. And so instead of like being a decent, Catholic and saying, congratulations, good on you for having these ability to withstand and to not fall into sin, he goes, haha, you're a loser. So these are my thoughts. Piers didn't have Nick on for a single pure intention. He did not want to know any of his positions on anything. And instead, he just wanted to, he had these, I guess, areas to check off. I'm gonna do the thing about his father. I'm gonna circle that. I'm gonna use his father's name a lot. I'm gonna try and knock Nick off balance. I'm gonna paint him as a racist. I'm gonna ask him about his sexual history. And by the way, this thing they're dealing with Nick, I think, is so weird. And everyone's asking him about his sexual history, his sexual preferences. And I think it's a wildly inappropriate question. I don't think I have people close to me who, if they asked me those questions, like if they asked me like my sexual history, I would feel like that's an inappropriate question for a friend to ask. For a stranger to ask that in an interview that's being, seen by millions of people is insanely weird. I feel like if we asked this of a woman, I think that society would more so protect the woman and say, you can't ask her that, that's weird. But I guess asking a young man that question is supposedly okay. So this isn't supposed to be like a defense of Nick Fuentes video, but Piers was so off the rails in this, and I think he just looked so poor in this interview. that he deserves the backlash that's coming his way. So I haven't made one of these long form videos in a while, but I just wanted to talk about this. If you enjoyed this at all, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you in the community, and comment to let me know what you thought of the debate. I appreciate you guys watching.